What's up, beautiful ladies and handsome men? I am not sure what's true or false in this story. I take gossip, tea, rumor, and scandal from yesteryear, from online, from word of mouth, from books, and I ball it up and I tell you guys a story. Now, let's get to it.
Baby, listen. Do y'all have any idea how hard it is to make sure a teenager gets enough D3 and omega-3 every day? Sure. But Ritual done changed the game, honey. Their vitamins include 9 high-quality nutrients, including D3 and omega-3. They are vegan-friendly, non-GMO, gluten-free, allergen-free. Honey, they even have 0 added sugars. So when I saw that Ritual had vitamins exclusively made for teens, oh baby, I jumped on it and grabbed it real quick. And my daughter, she loves them, honey. She like having the responsibility of making sure she take her vitamins daily. It makes her feel grown. She also loves that Ritual is so transparent with its ingredients that she can go online for herself and read for herself what she's putting into her body. She's sitting up there telling me, Mama, you ought to see, this got some magnesium in it. It's got some vitamin B12. Girl, go on. I know what's going on. We all got Ritual vitamins, honey. I got the ones made for women. My husband got the ones made for men. My little 7-year-old got the one that's made for kids and children. But it don't stop there. They got vitamins for 50 plus, prenatal, postnatal. They even have essential protein.
Listen, better health does not happen overnight, and right now Ritual is offering you guys 20% off of your first month. That's 20% off of 1 month's worth vitamins or proteins. All you have to do is go down and click the link below and use my code at checkout.
All right, let's move on to the member shout out.
Thank you guys so much for joining the membership. If you have not seen your name yet, do not worry, do not fret. I have more members to show off as we go along.
And a special shout out to I Am Just Me, Reese. Hey, hon. And I have to do one more special shout out to one of the greatest loves of my life, my mother, Denise. And excuse me if I tear up talking about this, when everybody else thought I was crazy and losing my mind for wanting to do this YouTube thing, my mama stood firm behind me. She absolutely deserves all of the greatest things in life that are coming to her. Whew, hold on, y'all. But anyways, the reason that I am shouting out my mother is because my mother has started her own YouTube channel. Baby, my mama know how to paint. I'm talking about paint houses as well as artistic painting. My mama know how to build pool decks. Baby, my mama built a whole bathroom and added it onto my childhood home. She knows how to make jewelry, how to build tables, and she knows how to craft. She has a DIY channel called DIYW Denise, which means DIY with Denise. And she just started her channel. It's literally just one woman standing in front of the camera doing her invention. And I am so absolutely proud of my mama. I'm going to put the link for her channel at the bottom of the pinned comment as well as in the description box. If you've ever wanted to do something for me, please go subscribe to my mama. It would warm my heart up so much if we could at least get my mama up to 5,000 subscribers. And that's the favor I'm asking from y'all this month. In the next couple of months, I'm gonna be asking y'all for a favor to subscribe to my husband's YouTube channel. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Right now, let's get to the cutest, most intelligent, sassiest behind child star who dominated the late 70s and the early 80s, Mr. Gary Coleman. Let's get to it. Gary Wayne Coleman was born in Zion, Illinois, February the 8th, 1968. The day after his birth, he was adopted by Willie G. Coleman, a forklift operator, and Edmonia Sue Coleman, a nurse practitioner. Now, gossip claims Willie and Sue did not know at the time, but the child that they adopted was a very sickly child. Gary suffered from something called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, and this was a severe kidney disease. As a matter of fact, when he was born, there was something already wrong with one of his kidneys. Like one of his kidneys shut down very early on. Willie and Sue did not miss a beat. They just figured, oh well, our child is sick and we have to do what we have to do. But treatment for Gary was very, very expensive. In fact, it's claimed that that is one of the reasons that his mother sought to put Gary in show business. You know what I'm saying? She felt like her child was uber cute. You know, she felt like he had a great personality and she felt like he could actually make it and be a star. And also, yes, he could supplement the income. So Gary's career began when he was just 6 years old, and that is when he starred in a Harris Bank commercial in 1974. After that, he appeared in a show called Medical Center. Then after that, he appeared in Good Times. He even went on to appear on The Jeffersons. This spunky little kid was on a roll. Then in 1976, 1977, word started to spread about a reboot of the show Our Gang, but this new show was going to be called Little Rascals. Gary, who was already on everybody's radar, went for the role of Stymie and he booked it. But unfortunately, the Little Rascals just could not get off of the the ground. But before they shelved the project, they shot a pilot episode, and this just so happened to be little Gary's saving grace. To see this kid in action, nobody could deny that Gary Coleman had talent. It was crazy to see a child so young to be able to use his facial expressions to get an emotion or a feeling over to the audience. A lot of child actors cannot do that. I mean, they try and they do it, but it seems kind of campy or kind of cheeky or cheesy when they do it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of child actors, when they do them little faces and stuff like that, it seems like an adult has been on the side being like, you know, do this, do that. Like, it just seems fake. But not Gary Coleman. This kid was a natural, and because he was a natural, there were eyes on him. And those eyes belonged to either Norman Lear himself or an associate of Norman Lear. And of course, Norman Lear is the guy who was behind all of the big projects back then. Good Times, All in the Family, everything. And so although Gary and his parents were kind of bummed about the little Rascals not getting picked up, they had no idea that something was already set in the works for Gary. Because Norman Lear had just started working on a show called Diff'rent Strokes, and he felt like Gary Coleman was perfect for one of the roles. And actually, let me correct that. The name of the show at this time was really 45 Minutes from Harlem, but they ended up changing the name to Diff'rent Strokes. So once Diff'rent Strokes was ready to cast late 1977, early 1978, one of the first calls made was to Gary Coleman, and they wanted him to play the part of Arnold Jackson. And he would star beside another little black boy named Todd Bridges, who would play Arnold's brother, Willis. And this show had an all-around great cast, but it turned out to be Gary Coleman who was the true breakout star. People could not get past this kid with this snappy delivery and with this strong but sometimes rude vocabulary. They identified with him. Parents saw him like they saw their own child. Little kids saw him like a sibling. So Gary was it, and Lord have mercy, honey. Don't get me started on the episodes where he was sitting up there talking about some, what you talking about, Willis? Baby, these folks was acting like they had never heard anything funny before this, honey. I'm talking about the folks just sitting in the audience just, It got a huge response, and it was not long before Gary Coleman started to be honored. And not only honored, this kid was turning into a cult phenomenon. He received so much praise that he got 5 Young Artist Award nominations, and he ended up winning 2 of those awards. Then he won the People's Choice Award for Favorite Young TV Performer 4 times in a row. Baby, it's gossip out here that's claiming this boy even earned pretty much almost $100,000 a episode. What they do that at? I mean, especially at that age and at that time period. The boy was a star, honey. And now that we have gotten to that stardom, it is time to get into the scandalous, messy behind tea for Mr. Gary Coleman. Not only are we gonna spill Gary's tea, but we also gonna spill his co-stars' tea, Dana Plato and Todd Bridges. Now let's get to it. Now this first thing is not really even a rumor. It's about what I told you guys about the show when it was called 45 Minutes from Harlem, but they changed it to Diff'rent Strokes because apparently at that time Muhammad Ali was all over the TV screen talking about some different strokes for different folks. Different strokes for different folks. And so Norman Lear was like, I'll take that, please. Thank you. Now for Gary Coleman, a lot of people thought that he suffered from dwarfism or some other little person disease, but that was not the case. And I know a lot of you guys thought his illness caused him to have a very short height, but that was not the case either. It was actually the medicine that Gary Coleman was on. Gary's disease was just that bad with his kidneys that he had to be on a medication so strong that this medication stunted his growth. So it really was a catch-22 when it came to Gary Coleman. Yes, you can live and possibly have a productive life on these medications, but you will be stuck in a 9 or 10-year-old body while you do it. And speaking of how bad Gary's disease was, by the age of 5, this child had already had his first kidney transplant. So he may have been a great actor, may have even been a star, but this child was suffering the whole time it was going on. Now let's get into a little deeper mess, honey, because gossip claims that when Gary Coleman became the star of the show, baby, they said his parents thought they was the stars too, especially when Gary started getting movie roles outside of Diff'rent Strokes. Baby said Gary's parents would show up to the Diff'rent Strokes set dressed to the nines, honey, in professional clothing and start demanding things. And a lot of those things was special treatment for their boy. Let me tell you something, son, you got more power than you know you have. This show wouldn't be nothing without you. And Gary, who was a child, started to believe everything that his parents said, and this spelled disaster because Gary Coleman started walking around like his stuff didn't stink. time. Honey, Gary would start coming to the set without even a hello to the other castmate. And if they just so happened to talk to him, he would wonder why. Somebody get this peasant away from me. Allegedly, his father, Willie, was the one that really fed his son these lies or this information. He was the one that fed his son things like, there's no need for you to talk or associate with these people because they're fake anyway, Gary. You know what I'm saying? They really all want your spot. They're all jealous of you. His parents pretty much alienated Gary from everybody else on the set. They even went so far as to hire bodyguards for their son. And maybe their son needed this in public, maybe not, but they had bodyguards on the set. So when Gary would finish shooting his scene, he would go and walk into the middle of his bodyguards and they would kind of enclose and make a circle around him so nobody else could come and talk to him. And being on this power trip meant Gary's attitude got nasty. Todd, I didn't want to say anything, but I think you walked in front of me on that last tape. Always telling folks to shut up, asking folks, why are you talking to me? Just always being very insulting and very snappy. And so with Gary acting this way, the relations between the cast went downhill very quick. And they did start to dislike the fact that it seemed like Gary Coleman was getting special treatment. You know what I'm saying? They started to dislike the fact that he got the best lines. They started to dislike the fact that he was always pushed forward in front of the camera. And yes, it was Todd Bridges and Dana Plato, but baby, the folks say that even Colin Bainsworth, or Colin Baines, I think his name is, the one that played Mr. Drummond, they say that he was a little bit, jealous too, because gossip claims when the show first started, it was supposed to be centered around Mr. Drummond. But see, honey, they mess up. If you want the show to be centered around a white patriarch, do not put a really funny black person on the show, because it's just gonna get stolen. Just like it was with Neil Carter and Give Me a Break. But anyways, to get back to the story, let me give you an example of how it's claimed Gary Coleman was acting towards the cast. So Gary came in one day and was pretty much snapping on everybody. If anybody called his name, yeah, what do you want? Or if they try to come up to him and ask him something about the script or about the show, Gary is running around like, please get out of my face. If you don't have it yet, you just don't have it. Sorry, boop, your fault. And so because he is snapping on everybody like this, Todd Bridges steps in and is like, Gary, man, chill, man. Just calm down, chill out. Gary looked Todd up and down and was like, dude, shut up. And so Todd stepped up to Gary and was like, you don't talk to me like that. Baby, Gary stepped up, jumped up, and slapped fire from Todd Bridges. And so Todd is thinking about it and he's like, bop, and slapped Gary all across the room, child. Gary Coleman's legs was probably in the air. Todd Bridges slapped him so hard. But Todd soon found out that Gary was absolutely the star of the show and that he pretty much could act with impunity because Todd Bridges was punished for this. They made him sit out of 4 episodes during that season just to let him know that you don't put hands on Gary Coleman. And I am pretty doggone sure that one of the reasons that Todd was pretty much taught a lesson like that or banned from 4 episodes had a lot to do with Gary Coleman's parents. You know what I'm saying? Because that is their little boy. That is their little star. How dare you let somebody slap my son like that? Well, like I always say, the he was on his doggone parents because what they didn't realize is that they were creating a monster that even they would have a hard time controlling. The folks say that one day Gary's dad, Willie, came up to the set and I guess he told Gary something that Gary did not want to hear. Baby, Gary got those bodyguards, the same bodyguards that his parents had hired to put his daddy out. And his mama got some of that stuff too because gossip claims that one day she was on the set and she said something that upset Gary. Baby, don't you know he pushed her in her legs and then took his food he was eating and threw it in her face? And Tyleek, I saw you in the comments talking about stories that happened on set. Maybe you might know more than me, but I couldn't find anything past this. But I do know that Gary Coleman was acting a hot mess because his hot messery or his tomfoolery even extended beyond the set, baby. Now listen at this. This may have been right towards the end of Diff'rent Strokes or even when Diff'rent Strokes had first got canceled. But I honestly think it was right towards the end of Diff'rent Strokes. Well, anyway, comedian Molly Shannon was just now coming into Hollywood and she got lucky and she booked the same manager that Gary Coleman had. And I believe this manager's name was Mark Randolph. So Molly is absolutely excited. I mean, she is thrilled to have the same manager as Gary Coleman. And so when the manager, Mark, asks Molly, hey, do you want to meet Gary Coleman? Of course, she says yes. So they leave the agent's office and they go over to a hotel that Gary is staying at. Molly and the manager goes in and the manager is like, Gary, I brought somebody to meet you. I have somebody I want you to meet. She just signed a contract and I'm her manager too. You know, she's very new to the town. Her name is Molly Shannon. And this Gary, how do you do, Molly Shannon? It's very nice to meet you. And then he turns around and walks to the bed and he sits down and he pats the bed beside him, you know, telling Molly, come on over and talk to me. Come on, let's get to know each other. So Molly does, and while she's talking, she notices that the manager, Mark Randolph, has left the room. But she doesn't really even think anything of it because for one, she's very young, and for two, she just now came to Hollywood. So she continues talking to Gary, and before she knows it, she's feeling little fingers, little hands, tickling her all up in here. And so Molly is like, you know, Gary, stop. Oh my God. And Gary over there telling him, I'm gonna get you. And so he keeps tickling her, possibly trying to get further and further to, you know, private places, but she keeps like pushing him away. And then suddenly Gary's tickling turned into pushing, honey. And he did one hard push and pushed Molly Shannon back on the bed and then tried to lean in and kiss her. And so Molly is like, you know, Gary, stop. And she pushes him off of her and she sits up. Well, once again, tickle, 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 pushes her back and tries to climb on top of her and kiss her again. Well, when she notices that Gary is not going to stop, she ends up getting off of the bed. Gary Coleman is like, oh yeah, and he stands up on the bed. Yeah. He launched himself off of the bed with his arms wide open like a bear hug and then like wrapped his arms and legs around Molly Shannon. Like the way a child would jump off the bed and wrap their arms and legs around their parent. That's what Gary Coleman did to Molly Shannon. And so she catches him and immediately Gary Coleman is like trying to kiss her and stuff. And so Molly Shannon takes him off of her and then flings him to the side. And this is Gary. Whee! And running back to the bed and jumping again and then launching himself on Molly Shannon again. Whee! He kept doing this. He kept launching himself off of the bed, getting kisses, and she would throw him off of her, and then she started to get scared because it was clear that this was not a game or not a joke or not a fun time. Gary Coleman was trying to get something from her. And so the next time she launched him, as soon as he hit the ground, she tries to take off running for the bathroom. But baby, that doggone Gary Coleman was too doggone fast, child. Baby, Gary Coleman got up from off of that ground like the leprechaun and took off running after that woman and then was hanging on her foot. Where you going, Molly? And so Molly is like, you know, Gary ain't went nowhere. As a matter of fact, when she looks down there, he's holding on tight, telling her, come back here, let's play some more. And so Molly is like, you know, no, I don't want to play. And then finally she does this final boom and kicks him off to the side and Gary goes flying back. And so Molly runs into the bathroom and shuts the door behind her and locks it. She's like, you know, oh my gosh, what's happening? Oh my God. Honey, she cannot even get her bearings together before she looks to the door and starts to see fingers sliding up under the door, telling her some silly Billy. I can see you in there, Molly. I'm not exactly sure what happened just right then or next, but I do know that as soon as Molly knew that Gary was away from the bathroom door, she burst out of the bathroom door and ran out of the hotel room. And y'all, I know he probably wouldn't, but it just feels like Gary Coleman was probably running behind that girl talking some Who asked me to do this story? Y'all know I like to act stuff out. Now to move along, while Gary's career was thriving when he was on Diff'rent Strokes, his health was failing. By the age of 15, he had to have another emergency kidney transplant, but this time the transplant failed to take. Gary Coleman no longer had any kidneys, which meant he had to go on dialysis. And he had to do these treatments 4 times a day and at least 4 to 5 times a week. So that meant almost every single day, this young boy spent several hours at the hospital hooked up to all of these machines, and then he would have to leave there and go on set and stay there pretty much the rest of the day. Like Gary Coleman was being worked almost to death. And as far as dialysis, he had to do that for the rest of his life. Now, all of these problems all mixed together started to harden Gary Coleman quite a bit. He became even more miserable, even more snappy, even more smart-mouthed than he was before. And this was starting to become more and more of a problem because as the show went on through the years, Gary Coleman became way less of a cute little kid. You know what I'm saying? He started growing up and he started to look quite strange, and that was because of the dialysis. You know, sometimes he would show up to the set, he was like puffy, you know, his skin was kind of ashy and gray. And since this is the case, and that show was basically based on this cute behind sassy kid, the ratings started to go down. Like, it was still kind of steady, like steadily going down, but still it was going down. Now, it was by the 6th season that things really started to fall apart. And that is because Dana Plato, the actress that played Kimberly, ended up getting pregnant. So the show started to make cast changes and pretty much everything went down the hill. And so the cast started to feel the heat of cancellation, especially little Gary Coleman. Now, gossip claims that there had been a trust set up for Gary Coleman, and all of this money that had accumulated was supposed to be available to Gary once he turned 18. The young man was supposed to have millions of dollars. Well, Gary got to age 18 and took a look into his account. Maybe everybody around probably heard a small thump on the floor, because I am sure Gary Coleman probably fell out. The folks say that it was about $250,000 to $280,000 in there. No money. He probably wanted to jump up and slap Todd Bridges again, because the year that he turned 18 was the same year that the show got canceled. So it was not like Gary Coleman could just be like, you know, wow, $250K, that's messed up, man, but that's all right because I got more shows to do, so I'll just like build it back up. He cannot do that because once again the show was canceled. And so then Gary started looking for somebody to blame, and the blame fell right on the shoulders of his highfalutin behind parents. Gary became very upset with them, and he became very suspicious of them. And because Gary felt this way, gossip claims that a lot of vultures started circling around him. Agents, publicists, friends, all kind of people in his ear telling him, you know, your parents are horrible. Your parents ripped you off. Didn't they adopt you? Did they do that just so you can become a workhorse? Did they even love you? And then to get it a little bit more scandalous, a little bit more messy in here, gossip claims that 2 of those people that were so-called vultures were a mother-son duo named Terry, who was the mother, and Dion, the son, was a Michael Jackson impersonator. Well, gossip claims that Dion met Gary probably about 3 or 4 years earlier because Gary's daddy, Willie, had hired Dion to kind of be the family gopher. You know what I'm saying? Remember I told y'all how Gary's parents, especially his daddy, sat up there and thought he was a star too? Well, since Dion was this guy and he spent a lot of time driving Gary around, you know, taking Gary different places, he and Gary Coleman became very cool. Well, at first, Gary would just confide into Dion about how much his parents hurt him. You know what I'm saying? About how much his parents got on his nerves, and you know, he couldn't believe that his parents had spent all of this money. But even though he was telling Dion these things, he still had contact with his parent. Well, the folks say that Dion ended up planning a 2-week trip to Hawaii. Child, say something was put on Gary so doggone good, child. Said that by the time that it was over, he wanted to give his whole life to Dion Meal. Baby, Gary Coleman got back. The first phone call he made was to his parents and was like, Daddy, Mama, you're fired. And I guess I forgot to tell you guys, they were working as managers for Gary Coleman. Pretty much just had a title for a reason that they would be getting some of his money. So Gary decided to cut his parents completely off, like not talk to them again. And then he also decided to sue his parents. And baby, you know it was a scandalous thing, child. Baby, the media jumped all over the case. Word started to spread around about how his parents stole all his money, how his parents lived this very rich life while Gary basically worked himself to death. But there was another side of the story that really didn't get into the media much. And this side of the story said that Willie and Sue Coleman were not crook parents. They were just stupid. Now, this side of the story says, yes, his parents did spend a lot of his money. Yes, they spent just about all of his money. But his medical bills were stupendous. Second of all, Willie fancied himself as showbiz parent royalty. Yes, he was a man that liked to throw his weight around. He was a man that liked to feel like he was in charge. All of these showbiz type people basically took Willie Coleman for a ride simply by stroking his doggone ego. Yes, Mr. Coleman, you know your son is king of the TV. He should be on all of the magazine covers. If you give me $100,000, I will ensure that he's on a lot of magazine covers. Yep. Now you're thinking, my son needs to be on all the magazine magazine covers. So you said 100,000? Here you go. I mean, so y'all get the gist. Like, he was just signing money away. And once again, all these people had to do was tell him what he wanted to hear. And then they were just ignorant to the business anyway. They felt like once Gary had made it, that meant he was going to be a celebrity forever. And so they both quit their job. They went and bought a big fancy house. They went and bought a big fancy car. And they just felt like, we can retire now. And so I know that we can still argue and say his parents stole his money, which they did take his money. But once again, gossip claims that it probably really was not evil intentions. It's just that they were dumb and people really took them for a ride. Now, the messy word on these old Hollywood streets is that when Gary pretty much cut his parents off and wanted to sue his parents, he was living in an apartment with his friend Dion. Well, Willie sees all of this stuff in the news where his son Gary has like cut them off and trying to sue him and stuff like that. And Willie is like, that boy need a life lesson. And so he goes over to the apartment banging on the door. Gary, you open up this door. This your daddy. Open up, boy. And Gary is like, get away from the door. Get away from the door. Well, eventually, Gary does open the apartment door and he just starts walking to his car. And Willie is kind of fussing and arguing with him the whole way. Baby, Gary got in that car. And next thing you know, life turned into a cartoon, honey. Baby, they said that car was running Willie all up across their yard. Honey said Willie was howling and everything. Gary, stop! Gary, stop! Then they said finally Gary had Willie right in his sights, right in front of the car. Baby, they said Willie had to dive out of the way. After Willie had landed on the ground, his feet was still in the way, like his legs. So after he hit the ground, he had to pull his legs up to his chest and was laying down there looking like a dead cockroach. After this episode, gossip claims that Gary went ahead and pursued suing his parents for the amount of $3 million. Well, Gary did end up winning the lawsuit, but he only won $1.3 million. But again, by this time, Gary was without a job. And so that $1.3 million went very quickly. And when Gary first left Diff'rent Strokes, it was not that he couldn't get roles for just because he couldn't get roles. It was because he didn't want to play any roles focused on his shortness anymore, like his height anymore. Well, I tell you one thing, after about 4 or 5 years and having a really spotty acting history, Gary was ready to do those roles. You know what I'm saying? Heck, he was even ready to do little kid roles and teenage roles. But he had made a fatal flaw. Once Diff'rent Strokes was initially over, Gary did a whole bunch of interviews talking about how the producers kind of used him, you know what I'm saying? How dare they cancel the show like that and just kind of kick us out like we're not nothing. So now those same executives and producers and stuff didn't want anything to do with him. He appeared on Fresh Prince in 1996 for one episode, but that was pretty much it. And so Gary was struggling so bad, he had to take a job as a mall security guy. Once people saw him working security, everybody wanted to come and take pictures. Oh, Gary Coleman, I remember you. What you talking about, Willis? What you talking about, Willis? And just always in his face. And then you had the folks that was sitting up there pointing and laughing. You know what I'm saying? Dude, you used to be big. What the F happened to you? And although he started off taking all of these pictures with people and stuff like that, after a while he just didn't want to do that. He just wanted to work his job and go home. Well, one of these times there were these 2 teenage boys or something like that, and they asked Gary for a picture and he said no. Well, these guys kind of walked off, but they snapped a picture of him anyway. Yeah! That's Gary. He has taken off running after these guys. And he's like, didn't I tell you not to take the picture? Didn't I tell you not to take the picture? And so these guys take off and they jump in their car. Well, Gary jumps on the hood of the car and plasters himself on the windshield like this. Talking about, y'all ain't going nowhere. Y'all ain't going nowhere. And these 2 boys, of course, have a camera. And so they take footage of Gary on the windshield like this, and they sell that footage to the highest bidder. So within days, Gary Coleman's face is going around the world, and people thinks that he's lost his mind, thinks he's insane. And then after that incident in 1998, this lady named Tracy Fields comes to Gary Coleman, and she asks him for an autograph. And Gary says no. And Tracy is like, please, Gary, please give me an autograph. I'm your biggest fan. Gary Coleman once again says no. Well then, I guess you just gonna give everybody else an autograph except me. I used to like you 10 seconds before you just said no. Now I hate you. As a matter of fact, ha, that's why you mall security now. Your career didn't go nowhere, did it? But baby, Buddy was the last thing that woman said before the fist of fury came after her, honey. But of course, just because people say things to make you mad or even harass you, as far as Gary Coleman was saying, you cannot hit them. You cannot use any kind of physical violence. So this woman went to the law. And he didn't make it any easier on himself. Like when the media found out and they kind of asked him what happened, instead of explaining the situation by being humble and basically telling everybody, I was tired, this woman started cursing me out, so I just lost my cool. Gary said this: well, she wouldn't leave me alone. I was getting scared and she was getting ugly. Now, Gary, why would you say some mess like that? In the end, though, he ended up getting a suspended jail sentence and he had to pay a fine, and I think that lady's medical bill. And then in 2007, something wonderful happened for Gary Coleman. He ended up meeting a 22-year-old lady by the name of Shannon Price. He and Shannon fell in love and they got married 7 months later. And then in 2008, the honeymoon was over, baby, because Gary and Shannon ended up on divorce court. And they basically told this story of how they just really could not get along. You know what I'm saying? It's claimed that Gary Coleman would throw temper tantrums and then start screaming and banging his head up against the wall. And then some people, and this was not mentioned on the show, but this is just gossip that was going on around this time, claimed that they saw Shannon have Gary Coleman in public and then kind of push him down. And like he just kind of fell down bloop on the sidewalk because she got mad at him. And then Gary talked about how he just really could not keep Shannon happy. But then he revealed something that was probably the reason why he couldn't keep Shannon happy. He pretty much revealed that he had not slept with his wife. That's probably why she had an attitude all the time, because you won't give her none. And this is crazy, but it definitely reveals something to me. Since all of that stuff has come out about him and Molly Shannon, it's clear that Gary Coleman got his confidence from his career. He was confident enough to try to sleep with Molly Shannon because he was a big time star at this time. Well, now, all of these years later that he's actually married to Shannon Price, he has no confidence. He is not a star anymore. And so it's like he didn't feel himself worthy. You know what I'm saying? Didn't think he was man enough, I guess. And so it caused trouble in the bedroom. And then the hot, messy streets say that Gary Coleman not only admitted that he had not slept with his wife, but Gary Coleman admitted that he was actually a virgin. He had not slept with anybody. But y'all know the messy streets say that something happened in Hawaii. So, I don't know. Shannon and Gary could not get it together. So in August of 2008, they ended up getting a divorce. However, they continued to live together and fight constantly. It's also alleged that over time, Shannon started to have open affairs with other guys. And so just all of this negative stuff must have just gotten to Gary, and it started to make him more bitter than he already was, because in 2008, he got into a fight with another person in Utah. Gary once again jumped in his car and ran this man over. And then in 2009, the stress was so much, Gary Coleman had to undergo heart surgery. And after this heart surgery, he started to have very bad seizures. And one of these seizures happened in 2010 on the set of The Insider. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the same episode where Gary Coleman appeared on the show and went clean off on everybody, especially that blonde woman, baby. I thought Gary Coleman was finna get up and slap that woman on camera. I'll put the link in the description so you guys can see for yourself. On May 26, 2010, 911 received a call, and it was from Gary's ex-wife, Shannon Price, and she told them on the phone that Gary had fallen and he had hit his head and that he was no longer moving. He was taken to the hospital where he actually regained consciousness, and then that very next day, on the 27th, things started to go downhill again. And then on May 28, 2010, Gary Coleman died at the age of 42. Now let's move on to Dana Plato and Todd Bridges. And I'm not going to really tell their whole biography like I did Gary Coleman, but we're going to move on to their tea. So just like Gary Coleman, Dana Plato was adopted as a baby by a lady named Linda Strain and her husband. But by the time Dana became 3 years old, her adoptive father abandoned the family. This started a chain of events that made Dana seek affection and attention. She was always trying to be in front of a crowd or in front of a camera, and it wasn't long before she asked her mother if she could act. Soon she was cast for Diff'rent Strokes, and people fell in love loved with this fresh-faced little girl. She rose to prominence very quickly in this cast, but of course she had nothing on Gary Coleman. Well, after about 4 or 5 years of being on this show, Dana started to feel like she was missing something. You know, she had turned into a teenager and she started to feel like all she did all day and night was work, work, work on this show. And she wanted some freedom. She wanted to be able to express herself. So she began using drugs. And it started off with just marijuana, but quickly started to include cocaine as well. Now, after 2 years of wild living and drugs, Dana ended up meeting a young man by the name of Lenny Lambert. They quickly fell head over heels for each other and they were always together, and this resulted in Dana getting pregnant. And it's a little bit of mess in there because gossip claims that Dana Plato actually ended up getting pregnant on purpose. And it was because she was wanting to determine her own rules. That way she could guarantee some type of freedom on the show. Well, her plan actually worked and she ended up getting the freedom that she was looking for from the show. However, she ended up looking like a clown because this freedom was permanent. They fired her behind. After this firing, life became very hard for Dana Plato because she finally started to realize that she actually was living a privileged life as a child actress because she was bringing in a lot of money. And now that she was not having any episodes anymore, she had no money. You know, her money was running out. And then what made it even worse is, like I told you before, Dana Plato loved the spotlight. Well, she was no longer getting that spotlight. And so she ended up having her baby and getting married to Lenny Lambert, but nothing could replace the feeling that she had being on TV. And so because of this, Dana Crazy Tail basically started acting like she ain't had no home training child. She essentially abandoned her husband and her baby and just started going out and living the party life. Gossip claims that she started sleeping with random people, started to do a boatload of drugs, and just like really almost went crazy because listen to this. The folks say that her adoptive mother, Linda Strain, had been diagnosed with scleroderma like some years before. And this was actually one of the reasons that Dana got wild like she did, because her mother was always seeking care or always in the hospital, so she was at home a lot by herself during her teen years. Well, anyways, by the time that Dana is 19, because I think that's when she got married and had her baby. So by the time that she's 19, her mother is sickly and pretty much on her deathbed. Honey, Dana gets so high and drunk one night, she goes to her mama's hospital room and her mama's like, "Hi, baby." Die. Why won't you die, mother? Just hurry up and die. Honey, the mama Linda is laying in the bed looking like somebody done slapped her in the face with a frying pan. She can't believe what her daughter is saying. But see, the thing of it is, in the next few days, Dana was the one sitting up there looking like somebody had slapped her in the face with a frying pan. Because she went home to her husband and her baby and started screaming and acting a fool, and she ended up jumping out of the window. And it's alleged that she was on the ground with all of this glass all over her and all around her, waiting for her husband to come out of the house and console her. Child, that man came out of their house with his baby son in his arm, jumped in the car and drove away, leaving Dana sitting up there laying like this. When her tail finally got up and started wiping all that glass off of her, she was looking even more crazy because she got a phone call from her husband telling her that he wanted a divorce. But ain't none of that the frying pan that slapped her in the face. The frying pan was that same week her mother really did end up dying. And so Dana Plato was going through it. And after a couple of years, her money was gone. So when she couldn't always afford cocaine, she started doing crack. Now, she was continuously trying to go for auditions and acting jobs and stuff like that, but she really just could not find any luck or not anything that was serious and paying good money. So she had this bright idea that she needed to pose for Playboy. And Playboy has made stars out of certain women. Unfortunately, Dana's backfired like a mother sucker. She looked trashy, and the only thing that came calling were trashy B movies. Eventually, all of Dana's money ran out, and she got so desperate to get her drugs that she ended up doing something like super crazy. This woman took a BB gun, went to a local video store, and robbed the cashier. Ain't had no hood, no face mask, no nothing, child. And so Dana gets like $100 or something like that, and she leaves. But the cashier picks up the phone and calls 911 and says, "Hey, Kimberly from Diff'rent Strokes just robbed me." And at first, I'm pretty sure that the police really couldn't believe it. You know what I'm saying? They probably really thought that the cashier was mistaken. But then something happened to confirm that it really was Dana, because while the police were at the video store talking to the cashier, Dana came back inside of the video store. Honey, Dana then came in there like, what happened here? What are all the officers here for? What's going on? Baby, them folks turned her around and put them cuffs on her so fast. And ma'am, you know what? You just about deserve that, ma'am. Because that's slow. That was slow. She ended up getting off light, though, with 5 years of probation. So it wasn't really the jail time or her getting in trouble with the law that was the worst thing. The worst thing is just like Gary Coleman's face was splashed all across the media, so was Dana Plato's. And this looked horrible. One of America's sweethearts is now robbing a video store for drug money. So it was really, truly humiliating. So much so that Dana just wanted to get away from Hollywood. Like, she ain't even want nobody to see her face no more. And so she took off for Las Vegas, and she decided, you know, well, I guess I'll just be a showgirl. I mean, I know it's low, but hey, I gotta do what I got to do. And baby got embarrassed, honey, when she found out that them folks didn't even want her for a showgirl. Now, you know, this really broke Dana Plato's heart because she was Kimberly from Diff'rent Strokes. She was a super successful star, and now you telling her that she ain't even good enough to be a showgirl in Vegas? But that's what they told her. So she actually stayed in Las Vegas for a while and started working at a dry cleaner for like $5.25 an hour. And then out of nowhere, she got an offer to be in a brand new video game. And this was one of those new digital interactive Sega video games. These type of games were just now coming into fashion, so it was really exciting for Dana to be involved with something that was obviously going to blow up and become worldwide. You know, it was really fun for her to be at the start of it. But what the people didn't tell her is that this game, Night Trap, was a vicious game. It was full of blood, guts, and then murder on the side, baby. And of course, this is nothing for today. Like, if this game came out today, nobody would bat an eye. But for the 1990s, this was terrible. And so pretty soon, Night Trap was like all in the court. Like, the creators were all in the courtroom and everything, child. Folks wanted to sue. People wanted to lay jail time charges on these people. And so once again, Dana Plato had made a horrible choice because when people looked at the game, she was right there on the cover. Her face was associated with this game, and people are like, Kimberly from Diff'rent Strokes, this girl going crazy. So once again, Dana Plato got on a plane and ran away. And this time she ran to her uncle's house or something like that and stole a prescription pad from his house, because I think he was a doctor, and wrote herself like a 1,500 pill prescription of like Loratab or something like that, and promptly got arrested. But again, they only gave her probation. Dana was grateful to be let off again. You know what I'm saying? She was excited about it. She was grateful. And she said now that she was done with show business. She went back home to her ex-husband and her baby. And she was with her baby almost every single day. She also ended up meeting a new man who became her boyfriend. They bought an RV and they started living in that RV together. But she just did not get the fulfillment. She missed the spotlight. It was a part of her. And so she took back off to Hollywood once again, looking for her chance. But wasn't nobody checking for Dana Plato. I mean, they just wasn't. I mean, well, like, it was one man who was checking for her, and he actually told her, hey, I got a movie for you. Well, come to find out, this movie was a soft porn movie. And Dana, with nothing else going on, she took it. This movie was named Diff'rent Strokes, Jack and Jill, and Jill. Come on, man. It was just about the lowest of the low that Dana could get. After she shot the movie, she took her money for that and she went and bought drugs, but then she went back to fly to where her son was. And I know I keep saying where her son was. Well, her son and her ex-husband were actually located in Oklahoma. She was only there for probably a few weeks before she got a call from the Howard Stern show. They wanted her to come so they could interview her. And I honestly, for the life of me, don't know what Dana Plato was thinking. You know what I'm saying? I think she might have thought that she was different. You know, I think she might have thought that these people were gonna look at her like a respectable star, you know, but they didn't. It was horrible. Baby, Dana Plato got on that show and them callers destroyed her. They were calling her a coco, calling her broke and stinking and dirty vag, and you know, you're not nothing no more, you're just trash. Like, they were going in on her. Gossip claims they were going in on her so bad that Howard Stern got a little like, you know, dang, y'all really going in on her. Honey, Dana Plato left that interview in tears. She was humiliated. She didn't even stay in California. I think this is where they were. Hollywood, I guess. She didn't even stay there for that night. Like, soon as she left the studio, she hopped on a plane and went back to Oklahoma. She gets there and she talks to her ex-mother-in-law about how humiliated she was on the Howard Stern show. You know, she talks for a minute and then she tells everybody, you know, I'm just tired. I just want to go to sleep. And so she goes out to the RV that she has that was parked in front of the home, and she goes to sleep. Well, the next day on May 8th, Dana Plato does not wake up. In fact, Dana Plato is dead. She was only 34 years old and she had died of an overdose. And some people say that it was an accidental overdose, but gossip claims that it was no accident, that she committed suicide. Her life just never turned out how she wanted it to be. The very last cast member I'm going to talk about is Todd Bridges. Unlike the other castmates, it really seems like Todd Bridges' young life was pretty stable. That is until he turned age 11, and that's when a dark shadow came over his life. Because, and this is a trigger warning, Todd Bridges was sexually assaulted. And he claimed that this person was a family friend or some sort of publicist. Even though this assault had gone down, Todd did not have much time to get over it or even focus on it because he had booked a role on the show Diff'rent. And I've already told you how he kind of got maligned on the show. Him, Dana, and Mr. Drummond, and how they all kind of felt kind of jealous. And then, you know, Todd had to deal with Gary slapping him and all that kind of stuff. So when he became a teenager, he also started using drugs. Him and Kimberly, or him and Dana Plato, actually used drugs together. And gossip claims that those two messed around or dated. I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen anything to confirm that, but I do know that supposedly it's very true that they did these drugs together, cocaine and marijuana. When Dana Plato got kicked off the show from being pregnant, I think that pretty much ended their relationship, but Todd Bridges continued to abuse drugs, and the show was able to hide it for the most part. That is until 1983. Todd Bridges got into some little shaky water because he was caught carrying a concealed weapon. Now, luckily, this story didn't just blow up and mess everything up. He just had to pay a fine of $240, but it kind of showed the path that he was going on. But then when the show canceled, all hell broke loose. Todd was another one who just ended up living the party life all the time, and he blew his money on drugs, especially once he started trying to audition for other shows and he couldn't find work. The only thing left for him to do, he thought, was just live his life in the fast lane. Then he started adding methamphetamine and things sure enough started to go crazy. Gossip claims that in 1987, Todd called somebody and made a bomb threat, and he got arrested for that. And then things sure enough went off the deep end when Todd started to hang around very shady characters. And some gossip claims that Todd was actually the shady character himself. Now check me out. One night, Todd was riding around drugging and drinking with a drug dealer named Kenneth Tex Clay. And they really were just hanging out, you know, kicking back. Well, eventually they ended up going to some house together. Todd does so many drugs that he ends up blacking out. Honey, the next morning, it felt like SWAT was in that house. All you heard was, boo, 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 open up, and then the police barged into the house. And when this happened, Todd got scared and he ran out. And all of this is alleged, by the way. Well, anyways, like I said, Todd runs out and he knows this is bad, but he's like, oh man, you know, I messed up again. Golly, I'm finna have to face a drug charge. Well, that was not the case, honey. Not by a long shot. You see, when Todd took off running, he failed to see the dead body lying right beside him. The dead body whose blood was all over Todd's clothes. Kenneth Tex Clay was dead, and from the looks of it, somebody during the night had shot this guy multiple times. And again, from the looks of it, that somebody looked like Todd Bridges. Todd claimed immediately that he didn't do it, you know, and he also claimed that he couldn't remember what happened. He had no idea who shot this guy. But from what it looked like and from what people mostly believe what happened still to this day is that Todd got to the house and he had finished all of his drugs. And so he asked the drug dealer for more. Drug dealer said no. And so Todd shot the drug dealer and took all the drug dealer's drugs. Todd denied everything, but he still ended up on trial. And it really seemed like Todd Bridges was about to go down for murder. But then somebody walked in that courtroom with them shiny church shoes on, baby, and it changed the whole game. Johnny Cochran got in there and started to plant all kind of seeds and doubt in those jurors' heads. And basically what Johnny Cochran did was saying that Todd Bridges was a child star who was done wrong. You know, these people had used him, and now that they got all their money from Diff'rent Strokes, they kind of just pushed Todd into the street. Todd might have messed up getting on drugs, but he did not kill this guy. He blacked out. Johnny Cochran was able to put this stuff so eloquently, the jurors felt, kind of bad for Todd. In the end, Todd Bridges ended up getting off scot-free and ain't learned one lesson, baby, because in 1992 he was arrested again, this time for narcotics. But I do believe this arrest did something to Todd Bridges because he got arrested with meth and stuff this time. So I think this was going to be a big deal. So I think this really, really changed his life. So gossip claims in 1993 he did finally end up getting off drugs. As a matter of fact, he got on track so well that he started to book more roles, and one of the most famous roles he booked was on Everybody Hates Chris. He was absolutely wonderful on that show. After Todd turned his life around, he ended up getting married and having 2 beautiful children, and he turned his life around. That's the end. He has a positive end, and as far as I know, he is still doing very well. So, it's very sad that Gary and Dana's stories did not end well, but at least we can be thankful that Todd Bridges, right now, everything is positive. So this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous tale of Gary Coleman and just the scandals, honey, of Dana Plato and Todd Bridges. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I gotta go. Bye.